vast majority of Glasgow's entertainments were populist, music halls, pubs, and so on and so forth. Really, they were squeezed in amongst commercial premises wherever a location could be found. And in the case of the Britannia Music Hall, the one survivor, this meant finding accommodation on the upper floors of a warehouse which had shops on the ground floor and had simply been built as general commercial premises.
It was converted from a warehouse in 1857 into a singing saloon, or free and easy, otherwise known as a music hall, which was an early form of variety entertainment but had more in common with karaoke than it did with anything to do with theatre. From the outset they were designed for variety, for acts of all different kinds, and of course the Britannia eventually became a cinema, which shows another form of flexibility, I guess. When Picard took it over in 1906, he added lots of entertainment to the building. He added a freak show, waxworks, a carnival in the attic space above us, and a zoo in the basement. And that's why he called it the Panopticon, because it comes from two ancient Greek terms. Pan means everything, and opti means to see or to view. And you could see all of the entertainments from the attic to the basement for the one ticket price. In the freak show, we had, over the years, because I mean the freak show was going for a very long time, it was going for over 30 years. And you had everything imaginable. Tom Thumb, the world's smallest man, Mons Butte, the man who had the world record for fasting, Ida Campbell, the human trunk, who didn't have any legs and only had one arm, Lucy Moore, the world's fattest woman. She was 42 stone when she arrived and about 46 stone when she left again. We had the human spider, the royal dwarf of midgets. With the zoo, there was 42 animal cages in the basement. There was a monkey house with two monkeys, Betsy and Solomon. They were married. And we also had a Himalayan bear. And there was other animals that would come and go, probably because they couldn't survive very long in the basement, to be honest. It wasn't very pleasant.
Britannia Music Hall Trust is seeking to restore the inside of the building. The outside of the building has been decaying for a number of years. There was blue paint applied to it, the stonework is degraded. The shop front also is not an original shop front, it's a 1970s shop front, which detracts from the very elegant proportions of the exterior of the building and also prevents easy access to the upper floor of the building.
It's a fairly typical design style for commercial buildings of the era, albeit a fine example. And although it was never meant to house a theatre or a music hall, it makes a fairly decent and prosperous looking facade for such a building. Our first phase was 3 years ago. That was to have a new roof put on the building, which the Mitchell family paid for. And the second phase, which has been underwritten by the Mitchells, but is actually being mostly grant funded by Historic Scotland and the Townscape Heritage Initiative, and that's the facade works that you see at the moment.
Merchant City Townscape Heritage Initiative was started about 5 years ago. Its primary remit is historic buildings in the Merchant City and Trongate areas. The Britannia Music Hall is known as one of the finest surviving music halls in the country. It's a kind of time capsule inside. In the upper floors of the building were actually sealed off in about the 1930s and then unused thereafter. Music halls survived well into the 1960s. It might be truer to say that in general terms TV killed off variety. Let's not forget that many of the cinemas themselves put on stage shows. For example, in Glasgow, what was latterly the Odeon, what was originally the Paramount Theatre in Renfield Street, it was a cine variety venue. That was pretty typical. So I guess it wasn't simply the cinema killing variety as the cinema adding an extra facet to variety.
Probably one of the most famous debuts in the world in this building, and that was the debut of one Arthur Stanley Jefferson, who in Hollywood became known as Stan Laurel and one half of Laurel and Hardy fame. Cary Grant, Archie Leach, he was then known. He performed in here in about 1919. The full story is that he was employed by the Bob Pender troupe as an acrobatic dancer and tumbler. The Old Brit audience was the poorest of the poor in the working classes of the East End of the city, who worked in appalling conditions, very long hours, and lived in very appalling conditions as well. As a matter of fact, they lived in the sort of conditions that homeless people would complain about. So they had really tough lives, and as a result, the music hall was where they would come to vent their anguish, anger, frustration. It's important on a worldwide basis because it's the oldest surviving music hall that we know of in the world. It's certainly the most intact early surviving music hall and cinema that we know of. And it's a very rare building as a result.
We're hoping that this will be the beginning of bringing this building back to its former glory.
I mean, one of the things about Glasgow that makes it a wonderful place to live in is that it's got a great music scene, comedy scene, a great theatrical scene, gallery scene. All these sorts of things make it a vibrant place culturally. And if the former Britannia Music Hall could be revived and added to that range of already very fine venues, it would only be good for Glasgow. And it's certainly a rare thing for the city to be able to boast a surviving mid-19th century music hall.
Hopefully a very happy and long future for another 151 years, although obviously as a living museum of music hall and popular entertainment.